Fear, anxiety. When you hear that word, what do you think of? When you hear the word fear, what does it make you think of? When you hear the word anxiety, depression, doubts, what does that bring to mind to you? I'm going to share a little story with you about a girl who was walking home one day, and her mom was in the kitchen, and she was doing dishes, and she was looking out the window, and all of a sudden she noticed all these dark clouds rolling in. And as the dark clouds started rolling in, lightning just started flashing from everywhere. And all of a sudden she was concerned because she knew her daughter was walking home from school, and she was concerned about her daughter, her young daughter, just a third grader, walking home even just a few blocks from school. But it was so dark and the lightning was going, and she was so worried and terrified that something was going to happen with her daughter. She was going to be so scared. And as she's about to just rush out the door, she looks out the window, and there's her daughter walking down the sidewalk. And her daughter was walking down the sidewalk, and then every now and then there'd be a flash of lightning, and she'd just get real still. And then she'd walk along, and then the lightning would flash again, and she'd get real still. And she did this all the way home. And when she walked in the door, she wasn't scared and full of anxiety and fear. She was actually bubbly. And her mom was like, she was kind of perplexed as what's going on. And she said, "Mom, you won't believe what happened." And her mom said, "What?" She said, "God was taking my picture all the way home." Perspective. Her mom was concerned that her daughter was going to be in fear because of the thunder and the lightning and all that was going on around her. And yet, to her daughter, God was taking her picture on the way home. So earlier you heard the scriptures from 2 Timothy as Paul was reading, as Tina was reading those scriptures that Paul writes to Timothy about not being concerned. What Paul was trying to do is he was trying to encourage Timothy, because Timothy was young. And in his culture, being that age and being outspoken was kind of a no-no. You had to be an elder in the community. You had to have some backing and some teaching behind you to have any authority to say things. And yet Timothy was a young man who was very outspoken towards the people about how they should be living. Some scriptures call it timidity. And that's what Paul was addressing. Don't let them think of you as being somebody who's too young or too small to do this, because you know what God's called you to do. So he's trying to encourage Timothy. He's trying to help encourage him. So if he has any doubts or any concerns or fears, those things would be addressed through words of encouragement. So I ask you, what is it about fear that makes us afraid? I know that's kind of a redundant phrase to say, what is it about fear that makes you afraid? But again, I go back to, if I use the word fear, what comes to mind? I'd like to ponder that thought for a second. What is fear anyway? So if you look up fear in the dictionary, this is what it says. It says, fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion. Go ahead and throw it up there, John Ross. Fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. Well, you take a look at anxiety, and anxiety is apprehensive uneasiness or nervousness, usually over an impending or anticipated ill. Now, there's one thing that both of these have in common. Did anybody catch it? Both of them. Put them up there, John Ross. The next line. Hit it again, one more time. There it is. Both of those, you're anticipating something bad. Fear says, this is going to happen. Anxiety says, oh, I'm anticipating this. And perhaps that's why Paul is encouraging Timothy, because he doesn't want Timothy to anticipate the worst. He wants Timothy to anticipate what? The best. Don't think about what you can't do. Don't think about what can't be done. Think about what can be done. Change your way of thinking. It's not a storm, it's God taking your picture all the way home. Perspective. This word fear appears in the Bible over 300 times. Think about that. 300 times the word appears in the Bible. Now, there are different types of fear the Bible mentions. The Greek word used for fear here in 2 Timothy is derived from the word deos, which means fright, and the word for fearfulness, which is delia. So I guess the real question today is, what makes you frightful or full of fear or full of fearfulness? What is it that makes you frightful or have fearfulness? Well, if I took a mic and I went around the room, we'd probably get all kinds of answers to that question. Some would say, well, the recent election gives me a lot of fear and frightfulness. Some say, well, the economy. Some would say my children and their future. Some would say all kinds of things. See, it's the uncertainty of the future that the enemy will use to try to bring fear into us. You know, we're not promised, I don't know if that old country song, I know I'm a country boy, but that old country song, I never promised you a rose garden. Along with the sunshine, there's got to be a little, rain sometimes. Jesus even said, because of me, people will say hard things about you. They will utter horrible things about you. They will try to discourage you because of me. So it's no wonder as believers in this world, we're going to face hard times. But think about those who don't have a Savior in their life. Think about those who don't know the good news. Think about those who don't have that kind of hope. How are they coping with fear and fearfulness? You see, this is the importance of getting the gospel out there. This is the importance of sharing with people the hope that they have. And this is exactly what Paul is doing. But he's also doing this. And this is the part that I want you to catch. Timothy is a believer. Timothy was raised in a Christian home. We read in that passage that his grandmother and his mom helped raise him and give him the knowledge that he needed. And they developed him and they trained him. And Paul developed him and Paul trained him. So he is a believer who is strong, but even he's having some concerns. So Paul is saying, don't give up, Timothy. I believe in you. So it's not just the non-believer that needs to be encouraged. The believer needs to be encouraged too. Because sometimes we know what God's called us to do, and we go and we get involved in whatever ministry God has called us to do or what he's asking us to do, and all of a sudden it seems like doubts start coming in. Fear starts coming in. The enemy wants to play with our mind. And this is where encouragement can really help. And that's what Paul is doing. You know, don't know if I've shared this with you before, but when I was first approached about being pastor here at Living Hope, and I was praying about this, something came to me in my prayer time. And God says, Ross, be ready, because you're going to have to deal with some fear. And I was like, fear? What do you mean, fear? He goes, well, there's fear within that body. And I said, well, my gosh, they're a praying church. They're a believing church. They got really good music. They start off each week with Welcome, Holy Spirit. What they got to be afraid of? And this is what God shared with me. He said one word. It was only one word. And I think all of us deal with this at one time or another in our lives. I'm going to see if anybody can get it. Do you know what the one word God told me was? Do you know what it was? Can anybody come up with it? Change. Change. Well, what if the pastor is like this? Or what if the pastor is like that? Or what if this doesn't happen? Or what if that doesn't happen? Or what if we don't hit our goals in the next year? Or what if? See, the enemy likes to play the what if game. So what if you eat of that tree? Did God really say? So what if change does come? So I started asking about this change. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking I'm talking about a change in relationships or leadership. Like what kind of leader are we going to get, or what's going to happen? Maybe it's a change in the way we're used to doing things, or a change in the way we allow God to use us, a change in the way we allow God to lead. And then all of a sudden it came to me. Yes, those can be some concerns when new leadership takes place. What kind of leader are they? And what if they change this? And what if they change that? But God says, that's not the change I'm talking about. The change I'm talking about is I'm going to do a new thing with Living Hope. I'm going to do a new thing. God's always doing a new thing. And he says, that's why I'm calling you there, because I want to do a new thing. And a lot of times that's what God does. When God calls us into something, he's maybe going to do it in a different way, or maybe he's going to do it. I mean, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He always stays the same. The Word tells us that. But he will use different people in different scenarios to bring about what he wants to do. And sometimes that will create change, and sometimes we don't handle change so well. But God goes, I want to change your perspective. I want you to take you away from the storm that you may see and put you in a situation where you're walking with me and I'm taking your picture because I just love spending time with you. Or however you want to see that scenario as I expressed it earlier. So let's play the what if game. So let's go ahead and play the what if game. So what if God does bring change? And what if that change is good? And what if the change gets growth? What if the change brings the lost into his house? What if that change reaches Prince Albert with a difference because of the gospel and because we embraced the change instead of saying, well, we've never done that before. Or we've never experienced that before. So as I'm doing this, that's what's going on in Timothy's day. Timothy is doing something out of the ordinary. Timothy is breaking the traditions that normally would be held by older ones in the community, who would be the outspoken ones, who'd be the ones preaching, who would be the ones teaching. And Timothy, at a young age, is already starting to do that. Sounds really familiar to me. There's a similar story. Can anybody think about it? Jesus in the temple. They found his teaching so astonishing for such a young man to have such wisdom. And you know the story where his parents lose him and then they go back to find him and he's in the temple and teaching and he tells them, don't you know I must be about my Father's business? So God sometimes uses the things that we don't even see to answer the what ifs, not in a what if that happens, what if this happens, but what if God does? And how to embrace those. Martin Luther made this interesting observation in his table talk once. He said, God and the devil take opposite tactics in regards to fear. The Lord first allows us to become afraid that he might relieve our fears and comfort us. Listen to that. The Lord first allows us to become afraid that he might relieve our fears and comfort us. The devil, on the other hand, first he makes us feel secure in our pride and sin that we might later be overwhelmed by what? Fear. I got this. I'm secure. I'm good to go. Can anyone relate to this? I know I can. There have been times in my life where I thought I had this and I was good to go, and I was ready. And then all of a sudden, just fear took over from the doubts. Ross, really? You think you can do that? Really? You think God would give you that kind of, really? God would give you that kind of ministry? What if it doesn't go well? What if this happens? What if that happens? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, I didn't think about that. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. And the difference is God calling you to something and going, man, I don't know. I don't know if I'm prepared for that. Well, that's why I'm using you. Because I will give you what you need. I will give you comfort and steadfastness that you need in doing that task. I know it may be hard for many in this room to believe, and I don't know if I've shared this from the pulpit or not. I know I've probably shared this in a few stories with you individually. I'm not sure if I've shared this from the pulpit. I know this is going to sound hard to believe, but up until the 5th grade, I was a very shy, bashful kid. I didn't speak at all. I know, it's like, man, the guy who talks forever. Maybe you should go back to 5th grade. I was a very shy kid. And it was a 5th grade teacher who saw something in me that I didn't see. And it was a book report due. And I was scared I'm not going to say scared to death, but I was scared. And she was a young teacher, just graduated out of college, and she had the forethought to start or try something new. Because I went to her and I said, there is no way I'm getting Miss Schulhaus. I said, Miss Schulhaus, there's no way I'm getting in front of the class and doing this book report. There is no way you're going to get me in front of everybody. Might as well just give me an F and move on. And she says, well, Ross, I'll tell you what. She goes, I won't do that, but I'll say this. Could you write it down? Could you at least just give me a written report and I'll give you a C? I can't give you more than a C, but I'll give you a C. So I spent the next week and I wrote my book report out, and I went to hand it in to her because everybody else was doing it orally. I went to hand it in to her. She goes, you know what, Ross? She goes, I'll tell you what. What if you just read it to the class? What if you just read it I'll give you a B. I can't give you an A, but I'll give you a B, up to a B, if you'll just read it from the class. She goes, you can even face the chalkboard if you want. And just read the class, I'll give you a B. I said, okay, well, maybe I can do that. So I'm sitting facing the chalkboard, and I'm reading my book report, and I hear a few laughs in the back of the room. And that is all I needed. Within 5 minutes, I was turned around. I was facing the class. They were on the floor laughing. I was reading my book report, and I realized God had given me a gift. That is somebody who's an encourager. And that's what Paul was doing with Timothy. He was encouraging him. Sometimes we can give in, we can let fear overtake us to the point of anxiety, and then it leads to depression, and then it leads to hopelessness. Well, and then you know. Scripture tells us that the enemy comes to what? Steal, kill, and destroy. And that's his plan. If he can bring you to a point of hopelessness where you have no hope, he's got you. And see, this is the important part of overcoming fears, and the important part of having that person who cheers you on, and the important part of knowing who Christ is in us, and then taking that same message to those who need it, who don't have hope. Because fear is out there. And more than ever, right now in the world we live in, fear is running rampant. Anxiety is running rampant. Think about it. How much has mental illness increased just in the last 10 years? Think about it. You know, used to we knew about somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who had a mental illness. Now, I bet if I said, anybody in this room, if you know somebody with mental illness, raise your hand, I bet every hand would go up in this room. Used to not be that way. Used to, you'd say, does anybody know anybody who has mental illness? And you might see a few hands go across, but not today. Fear, anxiety, hopelessness. These things are running rampant in our world, and they need the hope that Jesus can give. But it's not just non-believers that are dealing with fear and anxiety and mental illness. Believers are dealing with this too. And I know it sounds, really, believers? What would they have to? Because the enemy loves to come in and say, I don't know if you're really capable of that. Oh, look what that person did over there. See, he likes to plant seeds of doubt and fear in our hearts. So what do? We need that encouragement. We need somebody like a Paul in our life who can encourage us. We know that Jesus is our mediator, and he prays for us, and he talks about this. I want to stop right here today, and I want to continue this next week, because there's some things that I don't want to just, I know next week is Mother's Day, and so if I end up putting a message for Mother's Day together and do that next week, then we'll get back into this. But I don't want to cut this thing short and miss out some of the important pieces of this that I want you to see. Because just like Paul is encouraging Timothy, we need to be encouragers to each other on what God can do. And one of the most important scriptures, and I want you to think about this one, and I'll close right here, but I want you to think for this week, I want you to think about this one. But one of the most important scriptures that I come across and how to handle the enemy when he comes to me with his fear mongering and wants me to give into it is Revelation chapter 12. And there's a verse in Revelation chapter 12. Well, I'll do two verses here, and I'm going to give these to you. The next time we get back to this subject will probably be the week after Mother's Day. But I'm going to give you these two. If you look these up, this is a very powerful thing that I use with the enemy and his tactics on fear. Revelations 12, 10 through 11 says, Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, The salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah have now come. The Messiah being who? Jesus Christ, right? Because the accuser of our brothers has been thrown out, the one who accuses them before our God day and night, they conquer him. Now it's talking about the accuser saying, oh, what about that one, God? Oh, well, what about that one, God? Oh, what about that one? And at the same time, he's putting doubts in your mind. Oh, did God really say that? You think you can really do that? You really have the gifts? You think you can? And all this stuff is going on. But listen to this. The one who accuses them before God in day and night, they conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Listen to that. They conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Jesus went to the cross. He shed his blood for us. He died. He went to the grave to take the payment of sin and death for us. So salvation by the power that Jesus had when he went to the cross and his blood being shed covered our sins. So right there it says, by that blood, we've been cleansed. That's why we sing the song. Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? That's why we sing that song. But there's something along with that. And the power of their what? Testimony. We all have a testimony of what God has done in our life. Share it. We have a testimony of what Christ did for us. Share it. Because when we share that testimony of what Christ did for us, and we share our personal testimonies of things God has done for us, it overcomes the doubt and the fear and encourages others to deal with their doubts and fears. It's powerful, folks. The power of the blood and the word of our testimony. I think of, I grew up in the 80s, and so the music of my time, there was a song that came out, and it was a song that a young lady sang about her boyfriend, and the song was, What Have You Done For Me Lately? I would change that to, what has God done for you lately? Share that testimony. What has God done for you lately? We just celebrated Easter and we celebrated the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that is an exciting, exciting event that we can share with people to bring hope to them. But along with that, we can share testimonies of what God has personally done in our life to bring people hope. That's why we have testimonies. How did they overcome him? By the power of the blood and the word of their testimony. Let that soak in for the next couple of weeks until we get back to this, because there's a couple of things I want to show you, and I really want to share with you. I want to share this with you because I think right now, I know right now, in Prince Albert, in the surrounding area, just like many areas across this world, there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty in what the future is bringing for people, and we want to bring them hope.